Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast, The Guru. I am Howard Falco, and I am so honored that you're here to get some great, empowering information on life and how to learn that the true guru in life is always you. I am joined again by my lovely co-host, Tierney Rae, who has been here on several podcasts in the past to help me as we discuss more of the empowering information about life. So, Tierney, thanks again for being here.
Howard, thank you again for having me. I'm really excited for diving into this book again together.
Yep, exactly. We're going to get a conversation going as we go through some chapters. What we're doing is we're going through on this particular podcast, we're continuing what we did on a previous podcast, where we're going through some of the chapters in I Am and kind of discussing them. So for those of you who have read I Am, this will help sort of bring the cliff notes to the surface on where the nuggets are in the book. And for those of you who haven't, you're going to get a great insight on some of the material in I Am. So last time we spoke about chapters, we talked about the introduction. We talked about chapter 1, which is how you create matter, or you are energy and matter, I should say. Chapter 2 is you create matter, and chapter 3 is you decide what matters. But we spoke a lot about matter and its impact on you, meaning that the experiences of your life that affect your state of mind one way or another are actually controlled by you once you realize that they're controlled by you. In other words, you are shaping the impact that matter has on you by the way that you perceive and react to what you hear.
Say that again.
Okay. You decide how you're going to perceive and respond to the stimuli in your environment, meaning the people, places, and things that occur, based on how you decide what matters to you, how you perceive what's happening to you. So your beliefs determine your state of mind, they determine your emotions, they determine your reactions, and they determine what comes next for you. So it's all coming from your beliefs, which is a huge nugget in the book. That is why self-awareness is so critical to self-empowerment, because the more you can understand how you have identified with what is true or what you need to be true in the world, the more you can see how things can affect you in the world. And most people grow up not even realizing that they're doing this. It's just totally natural to them because no one gave them the education that, hey, those beliefs that you're operating out of, those are actually changeable, because the information coming to you is all neutral. Which, when I realized that, that blew me away, actually.
Yeah, that is something that's huge because we're taught to think that because of what's going on outside of ourselves, that's why we have the beliefs that we have. But in
Exactly.
reality, what you're teaching us is our beliefs are creating how we're perceiving the experiences outside of ourselves, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Our beliefs are shaping the way that we experience stimuli from the environment. And one of the, I guess, the easiest examples to use is in some parts of the world, when someone passes away, they actually have a celebration. They have a festival. They celebrate the transition of the person and that they've gone to a different place because of the way their beliefs are set up. It's like they know the person is liberated and they're going to, they're enjoying whatever it is that they believe in. Whereas in the Western world, we have a different take on that. And not that there's not a lot of sorrow and grief on both ends of the world, because that's naturally part of being a human being, but the process of mourning is completely different. One is mourning with a celebration, and one is mourning with a deep sense of loss and worry and concern, and that lingers and lingers and lingers. So that's just an easy example to look at of how two different ways of looking at and believing things in the world can create two different responses in someone's mind. In the book, I use a football example to give people an idea of how all information in the world is really neutral, where there's three people at a football game, someone that is a fan of the Bears, someone that's a fan of the Giants, and someone that doesn't care about football. And in the last seconds, the Bears throw a touchdown pass to win the game, and the Bears fan is jumping up and down. He's so happy, he can't believe it. The Giants fan is all upset and downtrodden and disappointed and depressed because of what he just experienced. And the person that doesn't care about football absolutely has no emotional response one way or the other. So it's just fascinating to realize that no matter what you hear on the news, no matter what happens in the world, no matter what you hear in through people that you know, not that we're not human beings, we don't have feelings, but we're programmed to respond a certain way. And what I'm saying is you don't have to do that. And I'll take it even one
Mm.
step deeper. Your response is a huge part of what you're creating for yourself in the next moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you're saying basically like your response is validifying all of your beliefs.
It's consecrating those beliefs to truth. And then it's also sending out more of that belief kind of into life so that life's going to continue to feed back to you what you believe is true. So, for example, if something bad happens in the world and you get upset by it, and you're like, oh my God, the world's a terrible place. And it sort of consecrates that belief that the world's a terrible place. Now you're sending out more energy to life that says, my truth is that life's a terrible place. So life in its response is going to start sending you more conditions to help you fulfill that. Whereas if you change the belief and say, hey,
Mm.
it's not, life is not a good or a bad place, it's just how we, what we make of it. Then when something bad happens, you're not using that to validate what you believe is true. You're like, wow, that's unfortunate that that happened. And I'm sorry that that happened. And I feel a little bit of pain because that happened, but it hasn't changed my outlook on life that anything is possible and that good things can happen. And that keeps the energy going out of you
Mm.
neutral. And you set the conditions to create something powerful for yourself in the future. Because life, again, I'll say this throughout these podcasts, life has to serve you based on what you believe is true. Life has to serve you based on what you believe is true. That's why it is so critical to come to a place of self understanding and awareness and be really a
Mm.
good witness to yourself and what's coming out of your mouth and what's running through your mind and how you're thinking and what you're saying. It is not, just looking through rose colored glasses. There is a huge effect that you can't see yet on the conditions that are building that are coming towards you. And that's really, in a way, what karma is.
Mm. I love that too, because what you're saying with how the differences of how death is perceived in different cultures and based on what society's taught us to believe about it, I do feel like right now we have this underlying belief of like death being this tragedy that we want to avoid. And it makes us live our life in just like so much fear and survival mode to just like stay alive. But then there's also this belief sometimes that life is a struggle. So it's like we can really claim the power of how we want to view everything in our life. So it can be super empowering to hold for ourselves.
That's exactly right. And you just hit on something really big in this work, which we're kind of jumping to level 10 here, but the fear of death is one of the biggest reasons for somebody having a negative mindset or a fear-based mindset that causes them to be very I dominated in the way they think about things versus we dominated in looking at a connection with all people because they're so worried about their own survival that they can't connect with other
Mm.
people. They can't live in a more enriched place, in a happier place when that fear is running through people. And I think that as people read material and look into sort of the the essence of consciousness and how it doesn't have a beginning or an end, and since we are consciousness, we don't have a beginning or an end, and they embrace this idea that there is no such thing as you not being. Yes, your physical body changes just like all physical matter changes, but what is the non-physical part of you, the energy of you, or what you would say your soul, is infinite. That doesn't go anywhere. Now, can I prove this? Well, I can only prove it by saying that, have you ever known yourself to be anything but alive? Right. And most people can't answer that question other than, no, I've only known myself to be alive. So there's your proof. But even more importantly, if you're looking to live a peaceful, happy, and a really powerful life of creating what you want for yourself, then dropping that fear, not that you're negligent about the way you handle your life, you don't drive 120 miles an hour or do things to excess that could endanger your physical health, but you just don't let that fear run through you as much. You can be more relaxed in life. You can be more clear-headed. You can be more,
Mm,
when you're not as emotionally on the negative side, you can see things clearer and you can operate in more of a flow.
mm,
But you have to do it from a state of grace where you know that this is an infinite universe. And because you're part of an infinite universe, there's an infinite nature to who you are. And I'm glad you brought that up because this is a huge nugget in this work. But everybody has to come to it on their
mhm.
own.
And with right. And I think we're getting to that place right now of where so much of this conversation is being brought up. And even we can choose how we want to perceive other people that, are living their lives in fear of that. We can get frustrated and be like, why are people acting this way? But we could also empathize with them and be like, me too. Like we all kind of have that fear of uncertainty, and
Hmm.
it's not right or wrong. It just kind of is there. And it's something we can explore.
Yeah, I think helping to understand that a lot of people live in fear can help you understand them and judge them less, because it's really easy to judge
Mm,
someone who lives in fear. For example, if like, um, I don't know, if your neighbor is like someone who touts guns and has like 10 guns and is always showing you in his guns and his alarm system and how he protects himself, and you never, and he's sort of judgmental about the world because he's living in fear. Before you didn't understand it, and maybe you're like, man, that guy's off his rocker. Like, and instead of judging him and, sort of sending out an energy where he knows on a subconscious way that he's being judged, and that makes him even more insecure, you kind of look at him with more compassion, like this poor guy is really frightened about the world. And being that he's your
mhm,
neighbor, your interactions are a little bit better with him, and he's more trusting of you, he listens more, and his fear sort of comes down a little bit because of that, because he feels more connected to somebody else rather
mhm,
than judged. I know that's a really specific example, but I think that's just one way to look at people who live in fear, and just shift it from judgment to compassion. Anytime I think you can do that with somebody is you try and stand in their shoes for just a minute and just say, okay, what are they going through that's caused them to be X, Y, or Z, which is so annoying to me.
mhm,
What's causing that? And
mhm,
you're like, wow, they must have gone through something I don't know about. So I'm going to give space to them. That right there can create healing.
mhm. Right. No, and I think that's a great, great analogy too, because automatically we kind of go into a judgmental place because we don't know, their life, and we're just, kind of finding the disconnect there. But if we choose to find the connect of like, where does that show up in my life? We can actually feel more close to that person and connected. So that brings up a really good point.
Right. We have more compassion for them because we know at time maybe we felt that way, even though we got
Mm,
through it and we advanced through it. But yeah, I think that that's important in order to connect with people. You can't expect everybody in the world to think like you do. It can be frustrating at times when you see the world from a different place and you want to help people and you want to help them out of their struggle and their suffering. But the first step in doing that, I don't care if this is a parent, a sibling, a friend, an enemy, the first way to change it is stop expecting them to be someone that you need them to be. Stop expecting them to think like you do, and offer a little compassion that they aren't there yet and they're still struggling, and see that that's the reason that they're acting out. It's not personal. Everybody personalizes everything. Oh, they're doing that just to annoy me, or they're doing that just to be a bad person. They're not. They're doing that because they don't know any other way. That's what I learned. And
mhm,
that's helped take judgment off really the world in a way, because everybody is operating to the best of their ability. Doesn't mean we have to like it,
mhm,
doesn't mean we condone it, but that's what's going on. So if we judge it, we're
mm,
not going to learn from it. We're not going to help heal it.
mm. Really powerful.
Cool.
Okay. So let's dive more into that chapter because it's so powerful.
Okay.
Go into finding my pages here. Where are you in your book?
I'm on chapter 2, which is you create matter.
Oh, okay. I was in still chapter 1.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So a couple of, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I have a couple things highlighted in chapter 2 then that I think are good points that we can discuss about without relativity, there is no reality. So dive into that a little bit deeper of
So
what
that
you
is,
mean by
yeah,
that.
that's a mammoth quote. And basically what that means is that every single thing in existence gives context and meaning and structure to your life by its difference. So if you're a good person, the reason you know you're a good person is because there's bad and evil people in the world doing bad and evil things. There's contrast. Now, I'm not saying we have to have it, but the point that it exists is for that reflection. So, so that's what that means in chapter. That's a big quote in chapter 2. Is that um, uh, read that quote again, Tierney, for me?
Well, it says, without relativity, there is no reality. And then another part that I have highlighted before that is we live in a world of relativity, meaning that we experience ourselves by distinguishing who we are in relation to every other piece of matter in existence.
Right. And the purpose of
And
those
basically saying
quotes,
our,
yeah,
well, basically just saying our sense of self definition arises out of these contrasts.
that's exactly right. That's the whole point of those quotes, is to show you that everything in existence has meaning or it wouldn't be there. And the reason that I'm doing that is because when you resist something, you're only keeping it alive. Now, when I say you have to accept it, that doesn't mean you have to take any negative energy from it. But what you have to come to acceptance with in order to get through it or to see it dissolve is that it is. You cannot resist its existence. You must accept its existence, learn from it, and understand it in order to move past it. Because again, if it exists in the world and you're experiencing it, it has a reason. If you're having an argument in your relationship, you can't just resist the fact that you argue in your relationships to get through that. You have to acknowledge why you're arguing in your relationship in order to master it so that you can not argue as much in your relationship. If you're not getting the sports performance that you want, you can't avoid areas in your game that are weak because they'll keep showing up. So resistance keeps those things alive. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
accept, okay, I haven't been hitting well because of this. Now I understand what I need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing in politics. It's the
And
same thing in
why
education, you know.
why do you think it is that we find it easier at times to avoid looking at these things or avoid communicating certain things that are hard? Like, why is it easier for us at sometimes
Well,
or at
I
some
don't think,
points?
yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's hard because most people don't want to acknowledge what they don't want to see or believe. They don't even want to acknowledge that it exists because it's too painful for them,
Mm-hmm.
the reality of it, the truth of it. So,
Mm-hmm.
if someone doesn't want to acknowledge that they've instigated arguments in their relationship because they've been a very negative person, they're going to create a reality in their head that says, no, it's not my problem. It's his problem or it's her problem. And without acknowledging that truth, it'll never get healed. It'll actually destroy the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to take personal responsibility. Life, this is maybe the bigger nugget, is that life forces everyone into truth. And when you're trying to create something for yourself, that's when you have to acknowledge full truth. So the best athletes in the world are not afraid to look at where their areas are weak. The people that have the best relationships in the world are humble and are able to self-reflect and say, you know what, I need to be better at that. I apologize. I'm going to work on that. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Can I point something out to you? And the other person in the relationship hopefully will say the same. Please do. But human nature, especially in today's age, our egos are so protective. They're so tender. They're so scared, so, but again, if you want to be in that percentage of people in the world that are successful, whether it's having great relationships or great in sports or great in business or on the spiritual road to peace are really stepping into new levels of being, it's because they're more open to truth. They're not as resistant. So that's a really interesting
Mm-hmm.
point you brought up, that I think can be very helpful
Mm-hmm.
to people. And the
And
way
I
to
think
get
sometimes too, when we,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. I think sometimes too, like when we blame certain things outwardly, it can give us this temporary sense of power because we're feeling like I didn't lose anything. We don't feel powerless in that moment. But it's so like fleeting because we're always going to have that kind of like wound. We're just masking it with different like projections or whatever it is. It's like, it's almost like when we reach for external power versus cultivating it from within. It's like
Mhm.
with addicts too. It's that same process of like, okay, I feel powerless right now. So I'm going to reach outside of myself to have this sense of power. But then it's like we always need to have these cords reaching outward to feel that sense of powerness. And when it's cut from us, from whatever life experience, we're going to feel that sense of powerlessness over and over and over again until we finally look at the root issue. And it's uncomfortable.
It can
So it
be.
makes
Yeah.
sense why it's vulnerable. Yeah. But I think it can be a portal into true empowerment. And that's what we don't realize is like that true empowerment is what we really seek.
Right. And that true empowerment comes from an understanding of who you really are. And I've
Mm-hmm.
said this many times, and this is a good time to say it again. If you knew how powerful you really are, you would never stop smiling. And life is continually trying to push us towards that, nudge us towards that, show us that. And the degree that we suffer is the degree we're out of tune with that or out of sync with that idea on the other end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this does not mean egotistical, I feel great, I'm great type of attitude. This is, I'm a perfect human being who's doing the best that I can. And if I could have done better in any past moment of my life, I would have. The only moment I have is this one. But because this is a divine universe and I'm a part of this divine universe, that makes me divine. And the more I seek that divinity within myself, the more I'm going to experience it in everything that I do and all that I am.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. When we seek external stuff, or we put up a fake idea of who we are, or we block truth, what we're really saying is, I don't want to see what the truth is because it's going to make me feel bad about who I am. So it's revealing a misunderstanding within oneself. So again, those who are most powerful in the world are the most humble. They're open to truth. They're open to learn. They're not afraid to learn. They understand as a human being, that's what we're all here to do. And so they allow themselves into whatever creative process they're in to keep making it better. Again, whether that's a relationship, they want to be closer, more intimate, more connected, more loving, more secure, or whether it's a business that they want to succeed, they have to look at how they treat their employees and how their product is presented and how their marketing is. They could, I mean, there's so many areas that people can dilute themselves and create time, right? Because when you're diluted, you're creating time as it relates to what you're trying to create. Um, and even on the spiritual path, it's the same thing. I've seen many people on a spiritual path who are so enamored with the idea that they're on a spiritual path that they miss the part of it where they have to acknowledge what the truth is on that path. And they end up looking so hypocritical at the surface because they were so enamored with taking on the identity of being spiritual, but not really understanding what that really truly means, which is you have to be naked
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to truth, like completely vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
and be okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, that's
Very good. All right, so let's continue reading. On page 31, I have highlighted, as a creative human being, your journey here is not to decide if you are going to matter, but rather how you will matter at each step along the way. This how is the essence of the free will that resides in you and every other person.
yeah, and that's a big turning point on the journey of life is when people stop the sort of grasping for the feeling of mattering, and instead of needing attention in order to feel existence, knowing that that existence already is, already matters, has mattered, and always will matter, then it turns from the need to matter to the choice of how I'm going to choose to matter. And it's a
Mm,
different approach to life.
that is so powerful.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like almost when we're feeling that sense of I don't matter, we can just kind of breathe in that feeling of existence. And then in that, we can almost relate to how other people have maybe felt that and gift them that understanding or that, and it makes us feel alive. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think what you're saying, and then tell me if I'm wrong, is that once you are at peace with the idea that you matter, you need less from your world. So you're able to be around other people and help them on
Mhm.
their journey to seeing the same thing. And you're able to give them that validation that they're looking for, that hopefully will make them more secure. So it's the old saying, like, once you light your own candle through this understanding that, this greater understanding about life, that you do matter, you've always mattered, just because you've been birthed into this universe, then you can go around lighting other candles rather than taking oxygen from the room because you need it
Mhm.
so badly. And we
Mhm.
both know many people, when they come into a room, they feel so insecure that all they've got to do is just drain the energy out of everybody else for their own needs. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
so I think that's what you were saying, is that once you feel it, you can offer it to others.
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah. You took the words out of my mouth.
Well, well, I didn't mean to do that, but
You
um,
said it a lot better than than I was able to. But yeah, exactly what I meant.
okay,
Um, and yeah, I think that we all have that. Like we go through that feeling of feeling like we don't matter, and we want to, find identity in these things to prove that like we do matter and we exist. But like you said, our very existence can reveal to us that we matter. So,
right. And again, I always like to take this and make it practical, Tierney. So we're reading I
mhm,
Am, which is the basis of I Am, is discovering the power of who you are. Once you realize how much you do matter, how much you can create. So again, in relationships, when you realize you don't need the other person to fully define who you are. Like, the worst words in a movie was from Jerry Maguire, where she said, "You complete me." Right? Like, you
uh-huh,
have to be complete first with your own self. Not that the relationship and the love of the relationship isn't an amazing part of existence and life, and is a big part of experience, but at the fundamental core of who you are, you have to feel good enough with you to have a great relationship. So you're not so needful in the relationship that it makes the relationship a struggle. You always want to have a
mm,
little bit of, of want in the relationship, I think, to keep it fresh,
mhm,
but you don't want to be needful. That's where jealousy comes in, that's where
mhm,
paranoia comes in, that's where control comes in. All those things come in a relationship when you're needful. Same thing in business. You don't want to be so needful that you take your eye off the ball on what the business needs to work, because you're so needful of your superiority as the owner of the business. Or in sports, you don't want to be so needful to have to do well that it puts so much pressure on your shot that you can't execute it. You have to know that you're okay no
mhm.
matter what, in order to allow your best talent to come out. So,
Yeah, and I think that that need oftentimes can block us from truly giving to our partner, whoever it might be, the love that we actually want to give. It's like we have that need there, and it almost makes us control and manipulate instead of giving love freely. And when
right,
it's not like aware, we're not aware of it, we completely like block ourselves from giving and receiving love
right,
to the people we
exactly.
want to connect with most.
That's exactly
Mhm.
right.
Really,
Um,
really good.
Yeah. When you're in love and you can say to your partner, I love you, and not need them to say I love you back, you've mastered it because then you're good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a natural reciprocation in great relationships, but when you don't even need to hear it, that's a little bit of a litmus test that you're in a great space.
Very, very good. All right. Anything you want to add on to that conversation?
No, that's pretty good. Let's keep going. So we're in
Okay.
chapter 2, right? You were reading a couple quotes that you had highlighted.
Yes. So, I mean, I have highlighted here evolution is creation expressed.
Okay.
And I think
So
that's like really, I mean, a bold statement. So I'd like you to dive into that if you could.
So evolution is creation express. So this goes more to the idea that it's this process of action and reaction, information, adjustment, reaction based on intent. So everything in the world is based on what your intent is. And that's where you start to experience what impacts you and what doesn't impact you. Getting to the quote, evolution is creation expressed, it's where what I'm trying to do is draw the connection for people that creation and evolution are the same things. And those two ideas have been sort of in two camps in the world for a long time. Evolution's been in the science camp, and creation has been in the religious camp, saying, well, it's creation, it's not evolution. And scientists say, no, it's evolution. But what they haven't realized, or it hasn't really come to full fusion yet, is that they're both the same thing. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing but creation in every moment. Creation didn't stop 2,000 years ago. Creation is still happening. If you see a volcano in Hawaii emitting lava, that's creating new earth. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
that's creation in its primal essence. In that red orange
Mm-hmm.
lava that's flowing. That is primal creation happening, expanding
Mm-hmm.
space on the planet or putting up a new island or whatever the volcano is doing. But the process of creation is evolution. And to evolve means to respond and react. So all of plant life, animal life, and human life is in a constant process of doing that, right? An animal is going to change its coloring if the environment's color of the topography of the land changes. The animal is their coat's going to shift color, their shell is going to change color over time, over many years. Why? For survival. If we want to learn how to communicate in today's world, my mom and dad have had to figure out how to text in order to survive. It's just the way it is. So
Mm-hmm.
creation and evolution are the same thing. Creation is and always will be, because life is constantly expanding. And evolution is the process. It's how we evolve. We have stimuli, response, and reaction. So that's what that means.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you explained that so thoroughly because I remember in my book club I have it titled A Book Club for Conscious Evolution. And when I first started it, I was just inviting a bunch of different people. And I had one of my close friends be like, I want to, but I'm kind of like turned off by the word evolution. Like it just kind of like rubs me the wrong way. And I was just like, like I was just like, that's interesting that like what would be the resistance, for that word. And I was like, what if you like swapped out the word evolution for like expansion or creation? And it's so funny how we have like preconceived ideas with words and how it can like, kind
Mhm.
of rub us the wrong way. But
Yep.
yeah, it's cool that you break it down that it's creation.
Yeah, it is. Because what I've learned about life is it's very divine. It's very exact. Because divinity is perfection. That's what divinity means. It's exactness. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's what life is. It's an exact process of, because this is getting bigger now, but it's an exact process of the expression of infinity. That's what it is. And that's where it gets a little heady and expansive, but it's cool to know that, because then it brings you closer to life, right? You get more faithful and
Mhm.
trusting of the process. And you start to trust the happenings that go on in your life a little bit more. Even some of the things that have been very painful. You open a little bit more
Mhm.
space to try and understand the whys of that. Um, and when you do
Mhm.
that, a lot of wisdom can flood in, where you start to see more purpose in it.
Mhm.
And again, this all leads to a calmer,
Mhm.
more peaceful soul when you do this. And a calmer, more peaceful soul leads to better connections with your fellow human beings. And it ultimately transcends into a better world, because all the major problems of the world can be traced back to fear and negativity. Every single one of them
Mhm.
is based in fear and negativity
Mhm.
on a global scale.
Mhm.
So transform,
Everything
yeah, yeah, right.
in
So
the
that's why you
world.
say transform yourself, everything from
Mhm.
man's consciousness. Let me say it that way.
Mhm.
All the wars, all the the disconnect, the negativity from man's or human being, not, I should say mankind's consciousness, not man's, but mankind's consciousness. Yeah, that's where it's from.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
um,
when we liberate ourselves from that own fear, from our own fear, it really does make this impact on the collective, because we're all interconnected in that way. And so when we're doing this own inner work, sometimes we feel like, okay, is it making a difference? But really, it's the most powerful work we can contribute to the collective, and in whatever way you're doing it in your journey.
exactly. There's a quote I have in the book. It says, I think it's in Time in a Bottle, and it's from Goth. It says, even a pebble affects the entire ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is right. You do your work, you transform the world. Really, with breaking that down, because your work, Tierney, is having an effect on your circle, the people that you have the most impact on, and you're leaving a
Mm-hmm.
mark on them in a positive way, in some way, shape, or form, where they've crossed paths with you and what you've done, and they want to be better for it in some way. And because of that,
Mm-hmm.
it's having an untold effect on people they connect with. Reminds me of that old commercial, and so on, and so on, and so on. I think it was a
Mm-hmm.
hair coloring commercial. Someone said a shampoo commercial from
Really,
back,
a hair
yeah,
coloring?
or back in the 80s. Yeah.
I did not expect that.
I know. I'm going to have to send it to you, because what happened on the screen, the person was like, I forgot what they were talking about, but they're like, and so on and so on. And then the screen divided into 4 of her, and then 8 of her, and 16, and then 30. I don't know. It was, but anyways, the point is, I digress.
That's deep for a
I know.
shampoo commercial.
I know, right? Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to send you the YouTube link on that. Um, but that's how it connects to the quote world, is that you're having the ripple effect on the people around
Mm-hmm.
you, and that's how much power you hold to change the world just by who you are. I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
exciting for each person to realize that just by taking
Mm-hmm.
this journey of self-awareness, you're doing exactly what you can do to help the world in the way that you want. But you have to be courageous to take this journey, because you're going to get confronted with
Mm-hmm.
a lot of truth on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it brings me to a quote in chapter 2, where it says, all of creation is designed to give you the awareness of more of the infinite possibilities that exist for you in each moment. You have complete control of how you experience reality based on your choices and decisions about what matters to you in life. These choices and decisions originate in your beliefs about yourself. Who you believe you are gives meaning and life to the matter around you. You have chosen to experience your life in a certain creative way for a reason, the understanding of which patiently awaits your realization as you continue on the journey of expanding self awareness. So that's the end to chapter 2, is which was you create matter, and chapter 3 is then you decide what matter. So chapter 3 then goes into how that happens, which we've talked a little bit about so far. And actually, so that's actually a good place probably to wrap this podcast for this particular episode. What do you think, Tierney?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that starting a whole podcast going over that whole chapter and concept. I think it's just like something we could dive really deep into.
Yep. We will continue the conversation. So remember, just a couple of the highlights of today's talk on chapters 1 and 2 from I Am is that you always have the power within you based on what you believe is true to determine what affects you, what doesn't affect you as it relates to your state of mind. Because the single most precious thing in the world, more than anything else, is your state of mind, because that energy that's coming out of you at any given moment is what's putting the conditions together for everything that you want to come into your life. And the higher the quality of your state of mind through a true understanding of yourself and the world in a different way is what does that, what empowers you. So just remember that. Tierney, thanks again for joining me on the podcast and for all your great questions.
Thank you. It was another great conversation.
Awesome. And everybody, thanks for listening. We'll be back again real soon with the next episode. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
All right.